that could use that arsenal right about now?
God, you never ask.
Hell yeah. They've been trying to stop the way, but the way don't stop.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another Backlot Banter movie review. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I am joined by my co-host who was supposed to go straight to HBO Max, and today we're here to talk about Blue Beetle, the latest and greatest entry in the DC extended universe or just universe. This one straddles a weird line. Maybe we'll talk about that, maybe we won't, but if you have seen Blue Beetle or the other DCEU movies or will see the DCU movies, comment here, I don't know, subscribe, talk to us on Discord. It's a whole thing. You're confused, I'm confused. James Gunn, it might be the only person on the planet who's not confused right now.
I don't know if he knows either.
When it comes to this. But Tanner, we have seen Blue Beetle, and we will be tracking this movie pretty closely, because it's going to be very interesting to follow. But give me your opening thoughts on Blue Beetle. What, is this like the Blue Beetle mask? What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing something. I don't know. That was also like supposed to be binoculars as well. But Tucker, my thoughts on Blue Beetle. I didn't quite care for this movie, frankly. I feel, based on like the Rotten Tomato score and everything, it appears as though I am in the minority of that opinion there. So I'm going to, try and draw out some things that I did like over the course of this film. But ultimately, my overarching thought on Blue Beetle is that it didn't really make an impression on me. Which was something that I was sort of anticipating in the lead up to it. Then the critic score on Rotten Tomato dropped at like an 83%. I'm like,
I think it's gone down.
It has gone down. It's like 79 right now, which is still very good.
Yeah. 79,
And it's ultimately that raised my expectations a little bit. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, for me, it didn't really feel distinct in the genre, which is something I frankly feel like it needed to feel like for me. And for a lot of people, and it is hitting that note for a lot of people, but just not me personally.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is Blue Beetle is two movies in one. There is the superhero side of the movie, which I think is where you're really drawing in on what, I don't know, I feel like I've seen this before. It's kind of an amalgamation of Iron Man and Spider-Man and Venom in weird ways, and then with like an absolutely tiny iota of DC flavor. But then the other side, and where I think this movie does stand strong and did end up grabbing me, and I ended up quite enjoying it quite a bit, is on the human side of this movie. This is a much stronger movie thematically than any other DC movie. Not that there's much competition, but no. I would say that it is.
It's my favorite DC movie this year. How about that?
Sure. You know what? I don't agree with that, actually, but I respect it.
I know.
And I think that on that human side, with the cast of characters, I found to be significantly more engaging, endearing, memorable than any other human characters in other DC movies. I mean, we love our superhero characters. We like our Suicide Squads. We like a couple of our Justice League members. But a supporting cast surrounding our boy Jaime Reyes here really made this movie feel full and distinct in a different way, because it's a movie focused on family. And think about most other superhero movies. Family is not a persistent element in them. In superhero stories in general, I mean, a couple years ago we got Miss Marvel, which was great at the family element, and I think Blue Beetle continues on that track of exploring a different side of culture that superhero movies don't, giving it that distinct flavor and focusing on family, which then in turn impacts the balancing of the script and the cast of characters, and then reframes our core character, Jaime Reyes, in, I think, a really fresh way. And Jaime Reyes and Xolo Mariduena as Jaime Reyes is one of, I think, the best characters in the DCU. I think he's absolutely fantastic.
Sure. Okay. I think we should talk about the family aspect, because that is something that Blue Beetle is heavily resting on. It is sort of putting a lot of its energy into this family dynamic. Yeah. I felt that in the theater, that it was like really trying to push that, and it's pushing the family agenda. Yeah, it is. But I'm frankly kind of sad to say that it didn't do much for me. I didn't feel it was very distinct. I feel like a lot of the characters here are operating on archetype and not much else.
Sure. Yeah.
We have, crazy uncle, annoying sister, wacky grandma. mom,
and dad,
dad, and Xolo, Jaime Reyes at the center of all of it. And I didn't feel like any of them were particularly well fleshed out.
Sure.
And the family moments, again, kind of just feel cliched to me. And there's something to be said for cliches when they work, and some of the cliches work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that they don't. And I'm also not going to say that this movie has no original ideas, because that wouldn't be fair either. But ultimately, when I look back on it, and when I'm looking back on this movie, I'm not going to remember a whole lot of this family dynamic, because it didn't leave an impression on me. So, and I know that's what I said initially, but it's the case.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think that I agree that it does operate on archetypes, and there are certainly some of the family members and some of the family moments that I'm like, yeah, this is kind of just going through the motions. I know what to expect here. But I think that in the context of this movie, and in the context of the larger DC universe and superhero genre that this movie is being released into, just a shitload of we felt like we were feeling superhero fatigue last year, and then we've still gotten so many superhero movies this year that it hasn't changed much. But it is distinct from that angle. I think that Ms. Marvel is kind of one of the only examples of focusing in on superhero families in superhero media. And so from that angle, I think it's okay that it falls into those archetypes, because it's setting itself apart from the rest of the genre in that way. And certainly from the rest of the DC movies, which are really about lonely people most of the time. And
talk about what about the Shazamily?
That's a great point. But
yeah,
I don't care. I care about them even less. But I think I also do disagree a little bit. I'll meet you halfway. I think most of the family members I didn't care for, but I cared about just enough of them to where it felt like we had a well-rounded supporting cast. The ones that didn't quite tickle my fancy are his parents. Don't get a lot of play. I thought his dad was actually gave a pretty good performance. He had a couple of good moments, but he's kind of a non-entity for the most of it. And his mom is really a non-entity. She doesn't do like anything. And then I didn't care for the grandma. I thought her humor was not very funny. The actress is like a significantly younger woman that they make up to look like an old woman.
Interesting.
She's like 60.
Good makeup work.
And that old lady is supposed to be like, I don't know, 85 or 90 or whatever.
I don't know.
So I didn't really care about the three of them. And they felt like family filler. They felt like necessary family filler. But like I wasn't like, oh boy, I can't wait to hear what Jaime's mom is up to next.
Yeah. Tucker, you mentioned his dad a moment, and I don't know, can we do spoilers for a moment?
Yeah,
Can we
let's do
do spoilers.
Come on.
It's Blue Beetle. Go see it or don't. You make up your mind.
Yeah.
So his dad, spoilers, dies.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, that's a well done moment. Like that's that's a moment that I feel is quite well done. That entire like raid sequence leading up to that, that is well obviously the director Angel Manuel Soto is very cognizant of what he's trying to emulate with that. Those being like ICE raids on immigrant homes in America.
Yeah,
and that is very well recreated. I'll say it sticks out a bit stylistically, but still a very well done sequence.
Yeah.
And then Jaime's father dies, and his sister is reacting to that. The rest of the family is reacting to that. Jaime himself is reacting to that, and I think that's in a capsule. It's a very well done sequence, and like a good impetus for him to go on to become the Blue Beetle, as is the case for many superheroes when a family member dies. But we come around to that character again towards the end of the film, when Jaime is sort of in this dreamscape sequence when he's communing and finally connecting with the Scarab for the final time. And
that scene sucks.
It's just
I hate that scene.
It's not good because we place them in this like entirely volumed, green screened whatever.
It's the worst CGI in the movie by a long shot.
Yes, and there's like a weird bloom on everything. And while I was watching that, I'm sure the dialogue there is good and meaningful because it harkens back to the conversation that they had when they were sitting on the lawn.
Yeah.
Which was a very well done sequence in my mind again, and a good connective
really good
moment.
Performance happened.
Exactly, a good connective moment for those two characters, and I couldn't help but wonder why we didn't use that visual shorthand again. Just have like him have another conversation with his dad on the lawn, looking out at the city again. because that's a moment that we registered earlier, that we liked earlier, but instead we have to do it in this like weird space realm, so he can do like the creation of Adam with the Blue Beetle suit. I don't know, man. It's just one of those moments where it like really feels like they fumbled in a big emotional moment.
Yeah, and that is where I feel that this movie is of two movies. And I mentioned earlier that there's the family and the human aspect and the superhero side of it, which the superhero side I'm hit or miss on. I certainly want to get into some of those elements, but you talk about how good the launch scene was, and again, that is where I call in on his dad's performance was really quite impactful. I'm like, whoa, hold on, this guy's like giving some really good emotion. He's got some charm to him. But otherwise, I didn't love most of those characters, as I mentioned, but I do think that his sister and his uncle give really good performances. I think they interact with him in really, really charming ways. They clearly have like a lot of in-jokes. They have some history together. And I thought that dynamic worked really well. And I was just really surprised to see how present these characters were, especially those two, across the course of the film. They really almost never leave his side, and so there's always a lot of family banter, and they're all reacting to things in different ways. And that's where I think this movie's best comedic moments and best dramatic moments end up happening, is when his sister is teasing him for something. And I'm like, okay, that's a fun brother-sister dynamic you don't usually see out of superhero movies, especially the fact that he's going through this receiving of powers with his family by his side the entire time, which is totally something unique.
Exactly. It is usually our hero is keeping his powers secret from the family, and they are like right there from the word go. And yes, that is a good like original idea that this film has. And if we want to connect the family and the superhero side of things, there's no better way to do that.
Let's still talk about the sister and George Lopez and all that, because I think that his sister, played by Belissa Escobedo as Milagros, she had a lot of fun to her, but really it's George Lopez that I want to focus in on. Including a storied comedic actor in a comedic relief role, just it works because he knows what to do. And George Lopez is delivering these snide remarks, and he's doing pratfalls in the background, and I'm like, he's just bringing like a really fun, unique energy to this, because he's like a conspiracy theorist, and he's like a kind of a doomsday prepper, and it's like, what the hell is this character doing in this movie? But he feels so distinct, and I love the fact that George Lopez is kind of his man in the chair and is providing him with weapons and stuff. And I really, really loved that George Lopez was around for like 75% of the movie. It was really, really there. A
lot. And this is a purely subjective thing, because those two characters that you mentioned are largely for comedic effect, and sort of juxtaposed against Jaime's sort of fish out of water thing with becoming Blue Beetle. Purely subjective comedy thing. A lot of the jokes didn't land for me, I was just sort of like humming along with a lot of their scenes. Like, yeah, okay, we're doing bits. George Lopez clowning around, I get it. His sister making snide remarks at him, I get it. I get it. But yeah, and just another thing that didn't quite click for me in Blue Beetle, sadly.
I want to continue a little bit on the character track, because the final side, there's a couple other side characters we need to talk about. Some are good, some are bad. Now we've got who you're talking about. Now we've got his love interest, Jenny Cord. Played by, oh god, where's the actress on here? This is not. This thing's out of order. Why is the letterbox thing out of order?
Tucker, I liked Jenny Cord. I think because she is the niece of. She's the daughter of Ted Cord, obviously the original Blue Beetle, and the niece of Susan Sarandon's character, whose name is
Victoria Cord.
Victoria Cord, thank you very much. And she's fun. Like honestly, in her little like awkward romancy moments with Jaime, and
I think they have really great chemistry, especially by the end when they're like sharing that kiss out by the barbecue. I'm like, they've got some like energy between the two of them.
Hey, it might be charisma. It might just be I like seeing two hot people kiss. I don't know what it is, but it's working. It's working. Yeah. Because by that same metric, and we can mention Susan Sarandon as well. But Xolo's great. We haven't drawn him out specifically.
We definitely need to talk about him more in detail. Yeah.
I think he has just like an innate charisma about him as a performer. That sort of does come to the forefront in this Blue Beetle role. But Tucker, do you want to finish wrapping up the side characters before we get into him explicitly?
Jenny, I thought she was really good. I liked the way that she plays into the lore of the Blue Beetle in an interesting way. We get this sort of legacy sequel without the first movie coming, because she has this whole history with Ted Core, and he was the Blue Beetle, so we learn about the history of this. I thought that was all relatively interesting. It certainly felt distinct for the DC movies, maybe not for superhero movies in general, but I liked what they did there. I thought it was good. And Jenny is an interesting part of that, in that she has this history where she's not quite comfortable with what her aunt is doing, and she wants to do better for the company and the community, but she also doesn't have this connection to family, and the sort of her discovering family through the Reyes family, I thought was really interesting. It gave her this unique dynamic, because she's like almost like a found sister, but she's also the love interest, and so I think that plays in really interesting ways, and I thought she did a really good job. But unfortunately, the Cord family is not just Jenny Cord. It's also Susan Sarandon, who is a great actress. She's literally an Academy Award winning Best Actress. And she's given this role where she's just a snide, racist, annoying woman. And she's just a stereotypical bad guy.
She's
fucking hated her.
It's like we took Obadiah Stane from the first Iron Man movie and just like stripped out any of the moments where he has to be like buddy with anyone and just made him like boringly evil. Yeah. And that's Victoria Cord here.
She's bad. And there's some particularly bad line ratings when she has to get like maniacally evil. Like, I don't buy this. You don't like.
Sorry, Susan.
Susan has I think more of a like calming presence usually in movies. She's like the woman that people are like telling their stories to, and she's like, oh no, it'll be okay. I mean, in this movie she's like, I hate poor people.
I'm like, fucking evil.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't care. And unfortunately that also extends to the incredibly generic B tier bad guy that we have.
Oh yeah.
Who has one interesting moment by the end. But for most of the movie he's just a guy in a CGI suit with scars on his face. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I do not care at all.
Carax, is that his name? Carax?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Ignacio Carapax.
Carapax, thank you.
Yeah.
Too little, too late with his like characterization, because that locket is something that we see, but like honestly, it's so come and gone that like you forget about it immediately until it shows up again. He's like, oh, he has a locket, and then at the very end, we decide to like humanize him a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a reasonably interesting twist. I mean, the fact that this guy had like maybe his memory suppressed, that part is a little bit unclear, but then he realizes what he's been doing the whole time is wrong, and he sort of teams up with Jaime at the end, and they give up their feud.
But I have to
kills himself and kills.
He kills himself. That's my main thing.
It's so weird.
Is that okay? We've redeemed this character. He has learned the error of his ways. He hasn't harmed. He didn't actually kill Jaime's dad either. It was just some random soldier. But like he decides to kill himself and Susan Sarandon, even though that's not necessary, and sort of goes against the theme of the movie, which is like Jaime wanting to show mercy to people and not kill.
That is a theme that is
we
not
do
consistent.
End up killing Susan Sarandon and this character Carapax for seemingly no reason. I don't know. It again, sloppy for me.
It's very strange, and I think that the villains are the weakest part of this movie. You can talk about the superhero lore stuff or the CGI or the action sequences, like, you know, they're fine, they're serviceable, they're not particularly memorable, they're whatever, and we'll certainly get to those. But the villains are, I think, explicitly weak. Their goals are unclear. Make money, make soldiers to take over world. I don't know. Build giant buildings to push out the poor people. Sheesh, I don't know. And neither of their performances are particularly good. Their intimidating moments are particularly good. I think the villains are bad in this movie, which is not anything new, especially for DC movies, having a really boring bad guy. But I think it sucks a lot of air out of the scenes they're in, and which is why I again focus back in on the fact that luckily they're not like omnipresent in this movie. There's a lot of sequences where they are just off in the background. We're not caring about them. Jaime's figuring out his powers. He's talking with his family, and that is where the movie is certainly at its strongest. And it's absolutely when Xolo Mariduena is on screen as Jaime Reyes, where he's giving charming smiles and he's doing awkward things. And I think he's one of the most like well-realized, charming, relatable young superheroes we've gotten in a while, which is cool because we're coming off of having Iman Vellani as Kamala Khan, and she's phenomenal, and Tom Holland is Peter Parker, and he's phenomenal. And I think Xolo Mariduena fits right in that. He has so much charisma to him. He's a hot guy, and he's delivering some fun lines, and I think he's got like a really good sense of quippiness. Like, it's not overkill. He's just a relatable, fun, young, like he's literally our age guy, which is so cool. Just out of college, like we are.
Exactly. And what I will say about him as this character here is that yes, Xolo is a very charismatic performer and has a lot of just innate drawing the audience in sort of elements to his screen presence. However, I look forward to Jaime Reyes being potentially more fleshed out in future DCU projects or whatever.
Sure, we'll see.
Because I didn't find him to be a particularly well fleshed out character here.
Sure.
Because I don't know, what do we know about Jaime Reyes? Is that he's out of college, he's pre-law. We don't know why he chose that. I mean, it seems like a pretty just easy dunk thing to tie back into the themes of the movie for him to be like, I don't know, wanting to get into protecting people's homes or immigration law or something like that. But we don't get anything like that here,
which would be very easy to do. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. But in like, he loves his family, and he wants to find purpose. Yeah. Which in itself is a pretty solid like baseline. Groundwork, baseline for a character. But I don't feel like we explore any of those elements quite enough. Like for purpose, he needs to be the Blue Beetle. Yeah. And why does he need to be the Blue Beetle? I don't know.
Have the ability to protect people. I think that I agree. I think it is good groundwork, but I think the reason it's not fleshed out is because part of the reason so many superheroes and their the human element and the superhero arc and the villain arc tied together so well is because they're personally attached to the stakes. Sure. Jaime Reyes is personally attached to the stakes in the fact that his family is going to lose their home. The people that he's lived with his whole life are sort of being pushed to the outskirts of Palmera City. Okay, that's pretty interesting. But he doesn't know Victoria Cord. She doesn't really care about him outside of the fact that he has the scarab by accident. And so there's never a moment where he really has to talk to Susan Sarandon or like wrestle with the fact that what she's doing is harming his family. I don't know. I think it's there, but because the villain is so weak, we never get these scenes that you get out of something like Peter Parker talking to the Vulture, or or Tony Stark talking to Obadiah Stane. Like, these are moments where it's like, okay, this is what my actions have meant. This is what my personality, how it interacts with this superhero ridiculous sci-fi nonsense. It's present like on a base level thematically, but it's never brought to the forefront in terms of a conversation, which I think if there had been like basically one scene where we set him up and a scene where we pay that off thematically and personality wise for Jaime, I agree. It would have been much, much more successful, but as it stands, because we have generic bad guy and generic action sequence, that never is given a chance to happen.
Yeah, we do get a lot of generic action sequence, don't we? Especially that last one.
I think the last act is bad.
It is bad. It is quite bad because you can't tell what's going on. We fall into like sort of familiar ground. You drew a Venom sort of comparison at the beginning of this. Yeah. It reminded me of the final battle of Venom, where it's poorly lit and our two characters are just kind of like mashing together in the sky. And I was like, who is doing what right now? And thankfully they are red and blue coded, so it's a little bit more perceivable than that Venom last action sequence. But and then we get into the thing that we already talked about with Carapax killing himself and Susan Sarandon. But like, ultimately, circling back to it, and again praising Xolo Mariduena's performance, that moment when he's like got half the mask smashed and he is like freaking out and about to kill Carapax, he sells that moment. He sells those emotions.
And the moment where his mask is fully off and he says, me loving my family, that's what makes me strong. I'm like, this guy's fucking killing it right now. But it's only those few moments of either a funny line or him being scared or hurt or whatever, where he's showing emotion, that give that last act any grounding, any personality. Because otherwise, there's just like cheesy moments with like the helper guy who gets killed and like has this moment. I hated that. That was so out of nowhere and it was random. Moments of Jenny and his sister like going around and doing whatever and like hiding behind things. I'm like, it's dark. I don't care about these bad guys. What the hell is going on here?
The Blue Beetle tank thing also.
I like that. That was the best part of that last act.
I don't know.
I thought it looked really good. It was fun to see George Lopez piloting it. He was being really violent with it. I thought that was by far the best part of that last act.
Oh no, I think that it felt like
it went beast mode. He pressed the beast mode button, Tanner. It's
I know.
awesome.
Tucker, just a moment, Tucker. I felt like they got a note in the editing studio where they're like, I don't know, it's just a lot of guys standing on the ground and shooting the Blue Beetle tank.
Yeah.
Can we inject this a little bit more energy? And they're like, I don't know, play a rock and roll, play Kickstart My Heart over it. Yeah. That'll give it some energy. It felt very much like, it just felt like that. It was like, oh, yeah, if you remove the song from this, it strips out a lot of the energy, because otherwise it is just our characters like sitting in a bulletproof tank, just stepping on dudes that are just doing that. I was like, okay, it's not very interesting for me visually.
Sure, yeah. I think that is where there's the most creativity on screen, though, in that last act sequence, unfortunately, is because this is a weird fucking tank with 6 legs, and George Lopez is piloting it, and I'm like, I'm having fun in that moment. But otherwise, a lot of dark hallways, and unfortunately, and I think this is where the superhero stuff and the CGI and the action tie together in their worst, is the Blue Beetle Scarab suit has a number of interesting concepts going for it. It has wings. It always protects its user. It's bonded to him. It can make whatever weapons he wants. These are interesting ideas.
Yeah.
But they're not, I think, sold in this movie because the action is so weak and he's not fighting particularly interesting enemies. So when he makes spike balls or a sword or a laser gun or a thing that like wraps them in a little whatever, none of these feel exciting. And it's like, okay, what is the extent of the weapons that he can create? Why is he coming up with these certain ones in certain scenarios? And while I think that the CG is surprisingly good, especially for a movie that was supposed to go straight to HBO Max, I'm like, oh, okay, actually, and especially coming off of some recent Marvel movies, I'm like, damn, they actually like kind of did okay with this. I don't really know what Blue Beetle's like combos are, or his skills, because a suit can do anything. It can sometimes take over his mind. He can sometimes like bond with it, but he doesn't seem that much more powerful when he's working alongside it. It's just very not well defined.
Yeah, it's also. I also have to question, like, so the Scarab is sentient. That is reiterated a number of times, and it is also reiterated a number of times that it chooses its host for a specific reason. Why did it choose him? We never really learned.
He's got a good heart. I don't know, but they never even go as far as saying he's got a good heart. That's why it chose him. Like, there's no definition. Yeah,
it has a lot of those kind of questions that are left unanswered. Which I don't know, can be a good thing and a bad thing, I guess, because I don't know if I'd want a whole Blue Beetle lore lecture in the middle of this, like a opening of the movie being like, the Scarab is a thing that came from an alien planet and it chooses a host based on these attributes. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I want that either, but it certainly didn't work as is.
Yeah. Are there any other elements that you want to draw in on before we wrap this up?
One small thing that I just caught weirdly. There's like a Goodfellas reference in this.
Oh, is
like
there?
When they're doing the scene where like Carapax is at that big fancy party with Victoria Cord. We open that sequence and it's a Goodfellas reference. We're playing the same song. We're doing like a one take panning around this party. It's like, Goodfellas? All right, man. I mean, hey, Angel, I also like Goodfellas. So me and you, brother, we're right there.
I did not catch that. Okay, look, Blue Beetle, I think that it has some of the lamest superhero elements in a genre that's already filled of things with lame superhero elements. Tanner, we watched Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Shazam! Fury of the Gods this year.
We did.
I would say both of those are worse than this movie by a significant margin. But unfortunately, Blue Beetle falls into a lot of generic superhero trappings. Generic bad guy, generic action sequences, poorly lit stuff, whatever. But Blue Beetle, I think, sells itself on being distinct from a personality side. I think Xolo has a very charming guy who's delivering these lines and performing these dramatic moments significantly better than he had any reason to be doing. I think that on a thematic level, tying it into gentrification and the distance between rich versus poor, and the Latin culture that these characters come from, and the history that they have that ties into like Americans providing weapons to South American countries, and like there's just a lot of like interesting themes that are put in here. Like a couple of the characters are illegal immigrants, and so they're worrying about that. There's a lot of stuff there that I'm like, oh, I find this kind of compelling. It's not particularly well fleshed out, but on that base level, like, it gives it a certain personality, and it leans into a family dynamic, which doesn't happen very often. But it's a movie, a movie of two movies. There's a superhero side that I don't care particularly much about, except for the fact that it gives me an opportunity to see a Xolo Mariduena put in these fun scenarios and have to rescue a girl and like be like, oh god, what's happening? But other than that, it's just like, I don't know. I really do end up liking the movie because I enjoy so many of the scenes. I like Xolo, I like his family, I like the themes. But then we get to a last action sequence that is like CGI nonsense. And I'm like, this is like the worst trappings that you could fall into here. Yeah. So while I fall on the positive side, I understand where you're coming from. Of like, it's just generic in moments, and it doesn't add a ton to the superhero genre, to the DC universe. I don't know, man.
Yeah. I'll just sort of echo a lot of that, and Tucker, I'll extend an olive branch to you as well. Is that
sure?
I wish I liked a lot of that family stuff, and for me, it just didn't click with me. Maybe hey, but by any chance, if we get a Blue Beetle 2, maybe I'll rewatch this with Ted Cord. Maybe I'll rewatch this and it will click with me. But I did feel the genericness about Blue Beetle quite a bit. I felt like a lot of its ideas were touched upon, but not very well fleshed out.
Yeah. Sure.
And I was ultimately left quite wanting here for potentially the first character in James Gunn's DCU. Potentially, that seems very unclear. Anyway, so that's why I'm of two minds about this as well. Where I was like, I have sort of equal parts where I'm like, I like this and I like the ideas it's going for, and it is kind of charming. But at the same time, there's a lot of ideas that are not fleshed out, and a lot of things that are undercooked, CGI wise, directing wise, writing wise. So that's why I dubbed this not bad mid Beetle, but just sort of conflicted mid Beetle, and I'm gonna go 5.5 out of 10.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit higher. I think that you have lowered me on my thoughts on this movie because I'm like, there's really a lot of horseshit in this movie. But I'm still gonna go at 6.7 out of 10. I still had a good time. I think that one element that I didn't praise yet, but I think this movie is surprisingly well paced. Again, I didn't like that last action sequence, but at 2 hours and 7 minutes, this flew by. I mean, when we were reaching, like, storming this island, I'm like, are we fucking done already? Like, what holy shit, that went about fast. So if you're looking for a superhero genre to be taken in a slightly different direction, representing a new culture, tackling a couple themes, having some fun characters, it is well-paced and entertaining enough. It's, I think, a good way to spend 2 hours in a movie theater. You're not going to completely regret it, but it's also not going to change your world.
No. One thing I did want to mention, I forgot about this, but we talked about how this movie is really kind of unique in the way that it implements a family dynamic here, and I agree. But I'm also like, I don't know, when we juxtapose this with something like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is a found family thing, which is much more common in the superhero genre, is this found family trope. I don't know. I find that sort of family dynamic to be more well done than in Blue Beetle. But hey, I digress. I understand that a lot of people are liking this. I'm just not one of those people,
Yeah. Well, we might be seeing more of Blue Beetle. We might be seeing more of Xolo Mariduena, and that I think is exciting to me because over most of the last all DC projects, I'm like, I don't care to see this character again. I'm not interested in what they're up to next.
You don't want to see Zachary Levi again? How could you?
I don't know. I'm done with that. But the potential that he will be involved in future projects, and we will learn more about his family, about the themes that this is tackling with Palmera City and Cord Industries and all of that, I am actively interested in seeing what they do next with this character. And that is, I would say, a very good turn for DC. Because we're coming off of most of these movies being like, I don't give a fuck what Diana's up to next. Like, I could not care less what the Flash does.
What could Aquaman be doing?
I don't care, but unfortunately I will find out this year.
Yeah.
Man, We're getting 3 DCEU projects this year, Tanner, and
4. No, 3. So 3. Sorry, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
3.
but we will be back for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom coming soon, maybe unless it's delayed. But thank you everyone for sticking around and listening.
Oh, it is 4.
About what?
Flash.
What's the 4th one?
Shazam.
Oh, I forgot about Shazam.
Yeah.
4?
It is
That's
4.
Crazy,
it is 4.
Man.
I wasn't crazy. Yeah.
Well, bye-bye.
Bye.